Hey folks, it's Andy Tyndall. The podcast is going to get kicked off in a few seconds here. For today's episode, I want you to ask yourself one question. What was the most spontaneous thing that you've ever done? Think about the outcome. Was it good? Was it bad? Or was it somewhere in between? Our guest today is Jake Wood. He's the current CEO of Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is one of the world's largest disaster relief organizations. It's unique in the sense that it's powered by former military personnel. Now, Jake spent some time talking about his latest book, Once a Warrior, but he also highlights spontaneity versus planning. He touches on what it was like being a first-time entrepreneur, knowing the things that he knew, knowing the things that he didn't know, but having the good sense in his head to hire and fill the organization with the right people so it could become the very best version of itself. What also stuck out for me was the unintended benefit of starting Team Rubicon, which were really just building a whole community, building a new mission, and restoring a sense of personal pride and identity for these former service people. Really hope you enjoy this episode. Hey folks, welcome to the Human Side of Greatness podcast. I am your host, Andy Tyndall. Thanks for joining. Today's show is all about two simple words: service and healing. Today you'll hear a great story from our guest, who is an author of 2 books, the co-founder and CEO of Team Rubicon, which is a volunteer organization that has well over 125,000 volunteers. He is a former Marine Corps veteran, as well as has done tours in Iraq and Afghanistan as a sniper. His organization, Team Rubicon, has become one of the most celebrated volunteer organizations in the United States and around the world today. Folks, please welcome Jake Wood to the show.
Hey, what's going on, Andy? Thanks for having me on.
Jake, thanks for being here. And I want to tell you, thank you for this great new book that you put out. And folks, if you haven't seen this book just yet, but Jake has published a new book called Once a Warrior: How One Veteran Found a New Mission Closer to Home. So we're going to spend some time with Jake today, just really getting to understand the story about the book, and his travels as a Marine, as a nonprofit executive nowadays, as a husband and a dad, and that sort of thing. But to kick off every show, Jake, we always have a couple of questions, just real simple questions for the listeners to get a feel for who's on the show today. So first question: if you had a superpower, what would it be, and what would you use it for?
If I had a superpower, it would be the ability to take naps, and I would use it to catch up on all the sleep that I don't get. I don't nap. I can't nap. I'm physically incapable of it. And I could probably use one now and then. So I think that's what I would do.
Love it. So just nap on command. Boom. Sleep.
Yeah, just nap. Just be able to, catch 15 minutes of Z's whenever I get a gap.
That's awesome, man. So if you had a 2-hour stretch, let's say you had a 2-hour stretch, and you had some choices. If you had the ability to play music, work out, or phone a friend, which of those 3 would you pick for your 2-hour stretch?
We have a mutual friend, Jason Ferguson, who's an incredible musician in his own right, and he would probably laugh because I'm well known for having zero interest in music, and so it would not be number one. I hate speaking on the phone because it's what I have to do for most of my professional life. So I would definitely go try to hit the gym up, which unfortunately over the last year I haven't been able to get to too much. So that's a pretty easy one for me.
Great call. So my friend, I got to just really thank you for being on the show today again. And just wanted to kind of kick it off and get an understanding of how you ended up going to the service, because here you are, growing up in the Midwest, and going to college. You've got a great, track, so to speak, to go and become anything you wanted. High-level executive at a private sector firm or something like that. But you end up going into the Marines. What or who inspired you to get on that track for your life?
Well, I mean, the truth is I wasn't on a track to do whatever I wanted to, because I wanted to go play in the NFL, and that didn't happen. So, I was playing football at Wisconsin, graduated 2005. So obviously it was the height of, or approaching the height of, both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, having been a freshman on 9/11, watched, our nation go to war in both those places, and seeing a lot of men and women who, were going off to fight that really weren't that different than me, other than I was a lot bigger and, a better football player and had the privilege of going to school on a scholarship. So I've been thinking about it a little bit. And then, the death of Pat Tillman in Afghanistan had a big impact on my decision to join. I ended up, his death happened right before my senior year. I made a commitment in the, moments or days following that to join, as soon as I finished my senior year. And, I played my last game on January 1st, 2005, and began preparing for the Marine Corps on January 2nd. And that's when I went in.
Wow. Pretty powerful. So what'd you think when you got going? Was it what you expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. I mean, the Marine Corps doesn't promise you a lot. They promise you a lot of hardship and pain and suffering. It's kind of how they hooked me in. It sounded like a good time. Boot camp was tough. It was a challenging 13 weeks, but I felt like, because I was a little bit older than most of the other recruits, I had a little bit of an easier time. And having been a college athlete, I was used to the kind of the hard work and some of the hard physical hardship of it. Went into the School of Infantry. After that, I had selected to go into the infantry, and so graduated from the School of Infantry, and I got stationed with a unit out in Southern California, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, out in the Mojave Desert at 29 Palms, California. And as soon as we got there, we began preparing and training to go to Iraq. The unit had just gotten back from Iraq about 6 months prior to me getting stationed with them. And about, 6 or 9 months after getting assigned to them, we rotated into Iraq. And that was early 2007. Okay. And basically for the next 2 years after that, I was either, in Iraq or Afghanistan. My time period in Iraq ended up being the deadliest year of the war, which was 2007. Afghanistan was really no different. We took more casualties than any Marine Corps battalion across all of the Marine Corps in 2008 while we were in Afghanistan. And so, it was a challenging time, but it was exactly what the Marine Corps said it was going to give me. And, it's basically what I signed up for. So I have no regrets, but I was ready to get out by the time that was all said and done after 4 years.
Man, yeah, I can imagine. Like I've never served, so I'm always in awe of folks who have done their duty for the country and that sort of thing. And so, in your book, you go into a lot of just really granular stories, and I want us to get into some of that as well. But before we go any further, for the folks who are not familiar with Team Rubicon, I want you to just explain to them how they can get a hold of Jake Wood or Team Rubicon, because I know there's a lot more than meets the eye with you, sir. So if you can just give them an idea, whether it's your guys' website, Instagram, whatever it is, Facebook, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we're pretty easy to find. So you can go to our website, teamrubiconusa.org. You can just Google us and you'll find 1,000 links. We're active across all the social media platforms. I think we even have like a TikTok channel now, which I've never been on. I have no idea what that even entails. And I'm pretty easy to find as well. I mean, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You'll get inundated with pictures of my kids, and pretty easy to engage with there.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So you do your duty, and you're out of the service. What's that like for you? What's going through your mind? Where are you at that point in time?
Well, so this is late 2009. I came home from Afghanistan after my second tour and just reflected inward about what I wanted to do with my life and whether I wanted to continue to fight in those wars. If I was going to, my options were to re-enlist for another 4 years, which would have meant, going back to Iraq or Afghanistan and again, kind of continuing with that, or getting out because my 4-year enlistment was done. And, I spent a lot of time thinking about it and ultimately decided to get out. I think when thinking about that decision, I ultimately came to the conclusion that I didn't want my life to be defined by war. I was proud of the service that I'd done. I was proud of the work I had done. I loved the men that I'd served with. But at the end of the day, it was becoming, the violence was becoming increasingly normal and easy. And that's not really who I wanted to be or what I wanted to become. And I felt like there were more important things that I could do in life, as important as that was to have served my country. So I got out in late 2009, not quite sure what I was going to do next. Debated going to college and getting a graduate degree and taking some time to just decompress and put some time and space between me and the tours overseas. But obviously, a few months after I got out is when the Haiti earthquake happened. And that's really when the Team Rubicon chapter of my life began.
So you're sitting there watching this all unfold like the rest of the world. What deep down inside of you just spurred you to say, I have to go now? I mean, I saw some of it in the book, read the whole book, and it was amazing. But I really want to get a granular sense of like what made you say, hey, I got to go right now?
Honestly, looking back on it, it was a lot of foolish bravado. I was a cocky, overconfident Marine who just gotten back from 2 combat tours and thought he was invincible. I had probably an overinflated sense of my worth. And so there was an element of that, right? I again, thought I was invincible, thought I could get down there and, save the world, which, only a dumb 26 or 27-year-old combat veteran has that, that sense of his or herself. But part of it also was service had always been a part of my life. I grew up doing a lot of community engagement. I was very active in high school in community service projects, and so it wasn't entirely out of the blue for me. I'd even responded to Hurricane Katrina right before I went to boot camp in the Marine Corps. A buddy of mine from high school called me up and said, hey, do you want to go down and help? We packed a car and we literally drove 18 hours through the night to go down there. And we were helping people just on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain. So spontaneously deploying down to Haiti wasn't out of nowhere. And then the last thing was I had decided to go to graduate school, and I had 9 months before the school was going to begin. Okay. So I just had time, and I didn't have a job. So all those stars kind of aligned.
So let's go to Katrina for a second right there. That was almost like a training ground in addition to being in the service, because you're on the ground in the midst of chaos, and you're in Mandeville, Hammond, all those kind of places, just helping folks dig out from Katrina back in, was that 2005?
2005, yeah. The fall of 2005. Yeah, it was. I mean, it at least gave me a sense for just how chaotic disasters were. We were only down there for 3 or 4 days. We didn't have any money and we didn't really know what the hell we were doing. And it was just the 2 of us. But it was an interesting experience, which, it's hard to say how much that influenced my ultimate decision to go to Haiti, but certainly I think it's at least an indication of kind of my spontaneity.
Love it. So you say, spontaneity, but throughout the book, I get a sense of how much of a quality leader you are. And most leaders have some sort of plan, some sort of vision. And there's times when you have to improvise as well. If you had to kind of pick one or the other, would you say you lean more to being spontaneous or more of a planner, long-term planner?
I think I'm more of a, in the Marine Corps, there's a saying, in the absence of a plan, move towards the sound of gunfire. I think that's probably a pretty apt description for me. I am not the most diligent planner. I can plan, I can write strategy documents and all that stuff, but that's not, I don't think, my forte or my strength. I think my strength is moving toward the point of friction and identifying, the opportunities that are present to overcome or to exploit those moments. And, certainly a part of that is understanding my own limitations in leadership and being willing and able to pull people in with the right skill sets to supplement them. And I think that's one of the reasons we've been successful at Team Rubicon is, I knew early on as a first-time entrepreneur that I didn't know a lot. In fact, the things I didn't know vastly outnumbered the things that I did know when it came to starting a business, scaling one, or even just responding to disasters. And I didn't let that stop me. And in fact, it probably strengthened the organization because it forced me to go out and find incredibly talented people to fill those gaps in.
Super smart. Even with that first group that went down to Haiti, I know your book is a memoir of so many different parts of the organization being built. But with that first group that went down to Haiti, can you share with the listeners how that kind of culminated or came together for you guys to make your way down to DR and then go over the border to Haiti?
Yeah, it's a really remarkable story of, almost serendipity. As soon as I made the decision personally to go down, I started calling guys that I'd served with, starting with my sniper partner, Clay Hunt, who couldn't go, and called a handful of other guys who couldn't go. And finally, I called my former roommate from college who had become a firefighter in Milwaukee. And he just casually said, yeah, I'll go with you, and he'd literally never been out of the country. So the fact that he's saying, yeah, I'll go with you to Haiti following one of the worst catastrophes of the last 100 years says a lot about his spontaneity. He probably rubbed off on me in college because he's definitely the crazier of the two of us.
He's the one.
So he was a firefighter. He called me a couple hours later very quickly and said, hey, a guy from my shift is a former Marine. He wants to go down as well. So then we had 3. And then I put it on Facebook, and a guy who'd served in the Marine Corps, but that we did not serve together, called me up and said, hey, Jake, I want to join as well. So suddenly we had 4 people, 3 of them Marines, and 2 of the 4 were currently firefighters. And so we started making the plans, and about 3 days later, we started flying down, and the plan was to link up in the Dominican Republic and make our way to the border. And what's crazy is as we were on our way down there, the plan was to link up with a Jesuit priest in Santo Domingo who had been recently located in Haiti, spoke some of the language, understood the culture, and he was going to be our guide. So we have suddenly this Jesuit or Catholic, effectively a Catholic brother, who's going to guide us. When I land in Santo Domingo, my baggage didn't make the connection in Miami. So I'm sitting there at baggage claim, and I see the baggage
the carousel
empty. And I sit there, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And the only other guy whose baggage had been lost was this gentleman standing across the room from me in medical scrubs, blue medical scrubs, like he'd just gotten off a shift at a hospital. He walks over to me, introduces himself. We talked about having lost our bags. He says, you look like you're about to go to Haiti. Because I was, dressed, for an adventure for sure. And I said, yeah, I'm got a small team. We're going to go over there. And he goes, you look like the type of person that I want to go with. I'm an ER doctor from Washington, D.C., and I'm coming down here to help. I responded to Hurricane Isaac, a decade ago. The Red Cross won't return my phone calls. Can I go with you? I'm like, hey, man, sure.
Let's do it.
And then my roommate on his flight down stood up on the plane and said, hey, we're going into Haiti. If anybody's interested in joining us, let us know. And a doctor raised his hand. He's like, I'm flying down just to see where I can plug in. So he joined the team. And then finally, the Marine coming in from Washington, D.C., William, he was on the tarmac of Dulles International Airport, getting ready to fly to Santo Domingo. And a guy leans across the aisle on the bus, and that's taking him to the airplane. He says, hey, Marine, because William was wearing something that, indicated he was a Marine. He goes, you look like you're about to make a bad decision.
Love it.
And it was Mark Hayward, who had been an Army Special Forces medic. And he said, hey, I'd love to join you. I've been to Haiti a couple of times, and I'm looking for a group of guys I can trust. Let's go. And so suddenly we had 8 people cross the border a day later.
You got a squad. So, you know, in the book, I distinctly remember you guys being on the bus and making your way through all the crowds and that sort of thing. And then you have to get into a compound of sorts. And I think it was kind of like a medical facility, like a hospital. And you pulled the slickest move I ever saw, man. There's a soldier, you know, man in the gate, and you basically let them know, hey, we've got these folks that are injured, da 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 da, and you pull out this ID badge, which I think was expired. Is that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So at this point, you're part commanding officer, you're part salesman, part hustler.
Hey man, we've long said that this organization was built on BS and charisma. You know, you make it till you or fake it till you make it has been a long standing mantra around here.
Yeah, man, that to me that was that just indicated the multifacets that you had to kind of be involved with to make sure everything started going the right way. Yeah. So Haiti puts Team Rubicon on the map. Can you share with the folks how the name even came about, the name, the logo, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, you know, as we were getting ready to go down, we decided to give our small team of guys a name, and the Rubicon was a river in ancient Rome that, you know, historians kind of point to as the turning point of the Roman Empire. It was a border that no Roman generals were allowed to bring their armies back across. And in 49 BC, Julius Caesar, intent on overthrowing the Senate, crossed the Rubicon and marched on Rome, so then the phrase crossing the Rubicon means crossing the point of no return. And so for us, there were so many unknowns and obstacles in the way of getting to Haiti and getting this help down to the people after the earthquake. We had to cross this border at the Dominican Republic. We knew we could get to the Dominican Republic. We didn't know that we could get into Haiti. Yeah. So we saw that border crossing as our Rubicon, and that's where the name came from. And so, you know, that's why, you know, the name Team Rubicon is somewhat odd to some people, you know, the way that name, the nomenclature of it, but that's where it came from, because it was just that small team to begin with. And we decided to keep that construct moving forward.
And the logo is brilliant because, I mean, here it is. You got the kind of like a river splicing through the logo itself. So that was also very, very well done.
Yeah, no, I got to credit my sister, give credit where credit's due. She's a graphic designer, and it was really her first take at what the imagery of the you know, the brand identity was going to be. And now it's tattooed on hundreds of people's bodies across the country.
Literally tattooed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Haiti puts you guys on the map. Money starts coming in the doors a little bit, and you know, things start to take off. At that point, what are you realizing this is becoming, or will be, or do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, you know, while we were down there, we began to contemplate what the organization's potential might be, and we started to understand that, you know, what made our effort unique was our use of military veterans. And so we came back from Haiti with this idea that we would kind of have this almost like a hobby organization, a club, if you will, of guys that, you know, and gals that came from kind of elite military backgrounds and would focus on deploying to, you know, international hotspots after crises. And so for the first year, that's kind of how we focused on it. And that's really what we thought it would be. And, you know, it wasn't until March 2011 when tragedy struck. My sniper partner, who I mentioned earlier, Clay Hunt, the first guy that I called after Haiti to see if he'd go, he killed himself in Houston, Texas. And that really just kind of forced a point of both inflection and reflection. You know, on a personal level, it was a reflective period for me, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and what kind of impact I wanted to have on the world. Because at that time, again, we were just treating Team Rubicon as a hobby. I had started graduate school. I thought I was going to really enter the corporate world. And again, Team Rubicon was just going to kind of be this thing on the back burner that we would casually do. But it was in the aftermath of his death that we committed to doing it full time. We committed to scaling it, and also kind of led to the transition in our focus from international operations to domestic operations, which really has been our vehicle for scaling over the last decade.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really challenging to read about Clay's death in the book. To see you propel the organization and use that as fuel to change so many other lives was massively appealing to me, to see the outcome of such a tragic situation.
Yeah. No, it was a tragedy, in every sense of the word. Any suicide is really, but he was a guy with so much potential for the world. The world really lost somebody particularly special when they lost Clay.
Yeah, man. From the understanding that, okay, we've got this thing and it's taken off now. What's your next steps? What are you thinking about doing? Because do you realize at this point in time, let's say 2011, do you realize that, okay, we're a couple years in now, we're having this impact? Do you realize the exact impact that you're having on the veterans, on the communities that you're serving, whether locally or domestic? Is that kind of playing out in your head or not at all?
No, I mean, it's certainly, if you're running a nonprofit and you're not thinking about impact, you've already failed out of the gate. It became evident to us fairly early that we had the potential to have tremendous impact first on the communities that we were serving. I mean, that was our value proposition from the beginning, was that we could build a better mousetrap and deliver aid more effectively to people impacted by disasters. But we also saw the impact, and we kind of think of it as an unintended consequence, that the work was having on the veterans themselves, the people that were finding an opportunity to get a new mission after their time in the military, and through that, join a new community of like-minded individuals, and with that, regain a real sense of personal pride and identity in who they were. And so, that was a really powerful driver of our early growth and success.
I think you mentioned in the book also about being a warrior, and the Greek sort of definition about being a warrior. And I wanted to see if you can go through some of those high points on it.
Yeah, well, it was really this, I think there was this point in my life where, as I was leaving the Marine Corps, I was trying to assess what that meant for me, and I think often people leaving the military have this sense of dread that they'll never do anything more meaningful than what they did in the military. And it's kind of a joke, like guys will always talk about how they'll never be this awesome again. Yeah. Is kind of the way that they phrase it. But what they really mean is, you have this opportunity where you, well, let me use the analogy. Like you've probably heard the analogy of, there's three types of people in the world. There's sheep, there's wolves, and there's sheepdogs. And, people in the military really take this sense of pride in, considering themselves sheepdogs. And then they get out of the military and they wonder, am I ever going to be that again? And so, the other word for that is like, you're a warrior. And I deliberately chose to leave war behind and to no longer be a Marine that was on the front lines fighting bad people. And so what does that mean? And what does that mean for me going forward? And so that it was like it was a vignette in the book at this point in my transition where I really explored that concept. And you mentioned the Greek philosophy on it. Heraclitus was a philosopher 2,500 years ago who talked about the 100 men that go into battle. And he says 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are nothing more than sheep. 9 are the real fighters, and we're lucky to have them because they make the battle. But one's the warrior, and it's his or her job to bring all the others home. And that's a saying or a phrase or a parable, I guess, that I've always thought of and pondered and pointed to and said, you know, if you can be that type of person that others look to lead them through moments of crisis, to that person that they can count on no matter the circumstances, to help them. That's all a warrior is. It doesn't matter what your job is. You can be a teacher and do that. You can be a CEO. You can be a friend. And that's really in the second half of the book, how we explore, you know, what's the future hold for veterans getting out. You don't have to resign yourself to this idea that your best days are behind you. Your best days should and must be ahead of you. And you always have to pursue a more worthwhile life after war, after the military, because it's one, what you owe yourself, and two, it's what you owe your country. So that was really the point of that.
No, dude, that's such a powerful piece that you put in there. And I looked at it just with an additional lens. I looked at it as you were bringing the folks back home, right? That's definition of a warrior, but you're bringing them back home with an added peace of mind and purpose. And that's what I've found in terms of understanding who and what Team Rubicon is. So fantastic job, fantastic concept. My question to you, though, is everything's rolling. At what point does adversity really show up for Jake Wood and Team Rubicon?
I mean, day one, man. Day one, we found ourselves in this refugee camp in Haiti, you know, with amputated limbs everywhere. So, I mean, that's kind of the obvious answer. I mean, Clay's death was obviously a gut punch, and you know, I think that we had two options. It was to kind of shutter the doors of Team Rubicon and just kind of close that chapter in our lives and move on as if it never happened, or, you know, do what we did, which was commit to it. You know, and proceeding from there, I mean, I document this a lot throughout the book. You know, it was not sunshine and rainbows. You know, it was, you know, flirting with bankruptcy. It was, you know, all sorts of challenges that any entrepreneur, you know, nonprofit or for-profit faces. You know, are you going to make payroll this month? Are you going to, you know, learning how to fire friends and, you know, doing all these things that are just the brutal side of being an entrepreneur. We had them all. People often look, I think, at the success that we've had today and the scale we've achieved today, and they thought, oh man, this must have been, you know, one hell of a easy ride. No, man, this was blood, guts, grind, you know, all those things to get there.
Embracing the suck, as you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that, to me, just mind blowing. I particularly love the part where I believe you guys were deploying for Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey, and you get a call from, you know, big Wall Street bank or Wall Street investment firm that most people out there know, and that kind of helps to change the game a little bit.
Yeah, and only because we were willing to bet on ourselves, right?
Yes.
You know, we certainly had positioned ourselves to have that moment with all the hard work that had preceded it. You know, and it's kind of that definition of luck. You know, luck is preparation meets opportunity, right? Yeah. That being said, I'm a big believer in luck. It's not all just preparation and opportunity. You still have to get that phone call, right? You know, that like we got from that big investment bank. But at that moment of consequence, you know, where we're on the verge of bankruptcy in that moment, we could bet on ourselves or we could play it safe. And, you know, in the spirit of what I said earlier about in the absence of a plan, move towards the sound of gunfire, you know, we decided that we were going to bet on ourselves, and we've done that a couple of times over the years, and it is what has led to our success.
Yeah, man. You know, even with that one slice in the book there about this particular time frame that we're talking about, I think the commitment that you made to them was to have 1,000 volunteers on the ground. Mm-hmm. And so we can splice words if we want, but you actually had more in the ways of 10,000 volunteers, if I'm not mistaken, if you count all of the local volunteers not directly associated with Team Rubicon. So in your book, you said you don't hit the mark, but you hit the mark, dude. You hit the mark. Come on.
Yeah. It's one way of looking at it for sure.
Yeah, man. So job well done. And so you are a recipient of the Pat Tillman Award for service. I didn't get to mention that in the opening and that sort of thing. Describe your feelings. Describe how that made you feel when your name gets called or you're nominated for it.
Yeah, it was truly humbling. That was 2018. Been doing Team Rubicon for 8 years. And you look back 15 years earlier when Pat Tillman's death had served as the inspiration for my joining the Marine Corps. And so you think about that 15-year journey. I fought 2 wars, buried 24 friends, lost 24 more to suicide when we got home, started an organization that had helped millions of people. It was that journey was as much about the tragedies as it was about the triumphs. Right. And there were some triumphs and they're fairly well documented with Team Rubicon, but I think too quickly we gloss over the tragedies that had to be overcome along the way. And so when that award came out, or when I was told that I would be receiving it, it was just humbling to think that Pat had inspired me to a life of service, and that someone, at least his widow, Marie Tillman, had felt like I'd lived up to his, who he was. And that was the honor of a lifetime.
That's big. Yeah, it's big. Wow. Yeah. Like I said, watching the video of that so many times over and over really just had a massive effect on me. So congratulations. But I know that's all through a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and a lot of loss as well. What about family life, man? What's that like for you nowadays?
It's amazing. I've got a wonderful wife who is supportive of the work that I do. Keeps me in line, keeps me home for sure. For sure. And we've got a great relationship. We've got our first daughter my wife was pregnant with our first daughter during that Pat Tillman Award. So that daughter is now 2.5. She's the love of my life. She's, as a former football player, my wife is 100% Latvian who, it's a hearty people.
She's from Latvia?
Yeah, my wife's Latvian.
Dude,
yeah.
That's great. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So our daughter's, the top percentile height and weight. It's just, she's hilarious. And we, and then we had our second child, who was another daughter, back in November, and she was born with a very serious congenital heart defect that required open heart surgery at birth. Very, very serious surgery. And she survived and she's doing great, but it was really a reframing moment for me. I feel like I'd like to think that I've always been compassionate and empathetic and understanding of the advantages that I have in life. Yeah. I have a job. I've got a college degree. I grew up in a great family, a nuclear family, went to great public schools. I've got health insurance. I've never been without health insurance. And I've always known that and appreciated it. But being there in that hospital, receiving over $1 million in bills on the backside, and knowing that I was only going to have to pay, $4,000, my max out of pocket, to save my child's life. And oh, by the way, we're at one of the top children's hospitals in the country, and we literally have the top 5 pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon working on our daughter, top 5 in the world. And I just thought to myself, like, not everybody is this lucky. And it just, for me, it forced me to think, what can I do to pay that forward? And I haven't figured it out yet, Andy, but I'm going to try. So we'll see. Man,
that is a huge blessing for your family. Congratulations on the second birth, the birth of your second daughter. But man, what a way to come through that. yes, there were a lot of great things that were going on to help that manifest itself. But still, as a parent, you just want your kids healthy. You want them happy. And I'm glad that's happened for you guys. And I will say, I think you're already paying it forward. I was looking to see what you guys are doing for the COVID-19 vaccinations. So can you just touch on that and touch on some of the work that you're doing right there?
Yeah, so Team Rubicon's been addressing the COVID crisis since the beginning, well over the last 12 months. And it's ranged from supporting operations in food banks, hundreds of food banks across the country, which we've never really done anything like that before, to, we launched and operated dozens of mobile COVID screening sites throughout the West. We sent hundreds of medics into Navajo Nation to help decompress the healthcare system there. Awesome. And in everything in between. And now we're embarking on an effort to assist with vaccination programs across the country. We've launched a coalition of veterans organizations to join us in that effort. And, we see that effort as the greatest logistical challenge in the history of our country. And I think veterans are well positioned to assist. So we're trying to step into that breach right now and do everything that we can to make sure that that every American, regardless of their zip code, has equal access to that vaccine as quickly as possible.
It's powerful, man. Powerful. So obviously it's not just Jake Wood, it's the bigger, broader team. I just want to ask you just two final questions. And I know you got a pretty tight schedule here. What role do you think your overall team or teams plays in the organization's ultimate success? And when I say team, I'm including your family as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't, speaking of family, this has been a hard and stressful job over the years that, hasn't always paid that great. And, my wife, I think, believes in me and knows that I could make more money doing something else. And she's never tried to drive me to do that, right? She's always been immensely supportive of me and my effort here. So couldn't have done it without her. And that goes across the entire team. But this team, I said it earlier, I didn't know what I didn't know when I started off doing this. Yep. First time entrepreneur, had never done this before. The team along the way is responsible for everything that we've accomplished. They've made me better. They have been resolutely committed to the mission and the vision of this organization. And they have poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this every bit as much as I have. And so there are quite literally hundreds of people who deserve credit for what we've been able to do.
Cool, man. Cool. With that said, I got to ask you this one question. What does the human side of greatness look like to you? I mean, this is the Human Side of Greatness podcast, so kind of like have to ask that question.
I think the human side of greatness is, I think it's living a life for others, whether that's your children, whether that's your spouse, whether that's your neighbor, your community, your country, or a global citizen that you've never met halfway around the world. As a species, we're only great if we're all thriving. No species has ever survived, solely focused on its own well-being. Like, it's all about creating the next generation. And I think that's what the human side of greatness is, at least from my perspective.
That's big. Love it. And so final, when the guests are coming down to the last couple minutes of the talk here, always want to see if there's a quote or a motto that you try to live your life by or you really enjoy.
Dozens.
Dozens.
I'll point to one that always resonated with me, and I will butcher it, but it's the old Calvin Coolidge quote about persistence. And it basically, if I can paraphrase it, it's that the most important thing in life is persistence. It's not talent. I can find dozens of people with better talent. It's not pedigree. It's not, any of those things. The characteristic that trumps all of those things is persistence. And, I hope that if I've been anything as a leader, a friend, a mentor, any of those things, that people would say he never gave up. No matter how hard the road was, he was persistent.
That, Jake, that seals it right there. Great quote. I'm sure the listeners will appreciate it. I just want to thank you for taking time out today to just join us on the podcast and give us just a high level view of the book and the memoir itself. And I want to thank you again for all the great work you're doing domestically as well as internationally for so many communities.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you, and I can't wait to hear what your listeners think.
Awesome, man.